topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
I don't care if you're talking about Me and Bobby McGee or Paint Me a Birmingham or Jack and Diane. Every one of those songs has something very unique in common. It's a story from the beginning to end. There's a plot. There's a bunch of characters developed. There's something that you know about their life and their past and their future, their dreams and their hopes and their passions. It's all wrapped up in the song. I Love a Rainy Night. Not as much of a song. But the list goes on of stories that are crafted into songs, into poetry, into conversation. And top-level communicators are very, very specific about the stories they select to tell because they lead people to believe, they lead people to think, they lead people to participate in different ways. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. Through the process I call the Story Power Method, the first step, and I believe the most important step, is story selection. And when I mean story selection, there's kind of bookends on the story selection process. On the one end, it's a matter of looking into your life and saying, what are some of the stories that I like to tell? Who are the characters, the players, the people? Who was involved when it happened? Why does that matter? Well, because the kind of people that participated in the story when it happened the first time are most likely going to be the kind of people that are intrigued by the story when you retell it. If you're a parent, or if you've ever been a child and your parents told stories about you, you know as well as I do, there's some kind of an emotional bubbliness that comes up when someone's talking about you and they're telling a story about you. I experienced it when my mom used to tell stories about me as a kid, even when I was the bad guy in the story. If my mom told a story to her friends about me crashing my tricycle 3 times in the same day on the same coffee table, which was sadly a true story, I had stitches, and then I knocked the stitches out, and then I knocked those stitches out, in the same house, on the same tricycle, on the same coffee table, in the same day. Eventually, they took the wheels off the tricycle and it wouldn't go anywhere. Well, even though that story doesn't paint me in a great light, just the fact that I was the subject of the story and I would hear my mom telling that story about me caused me to resonate again with that moment. For the moment, I was in the spotlight. It was a bad light, but I was in the spotlight. And that's true of people if they're human. Of all ages and all types and all cultures, there's something in us that seems like recognition when we're the subject of the story. Now, if it's a crude joke or it's a humiliating story, that may not remain the case. But for the most part, if there's a story and we can see ourselves in it, especially if we know that it's us in it, there's something in us that resonates with that story. I can also tell you, though, when I tell stories that I've selected about my boys when they were teenagers or my daughters when they were younger, those stories tend to resonate with people who are just like that. Maybe they were just like that when they were growing up, or they are just like that now. When I tell stories about my teenage sons to teenage boys, they laugh right along with us because they realize they were that close to doing the same kind of silliness, or maybe they actually did. In fact, oftentimes I'll tell one of those stories and teenage boys will go, I did that, but I also did this. What I did was even worse. Or, yeah, I did that, but I got caught and got in trouble for it. And so that selection of the story is part of the opportunity to lead that comes up with a strong communicator's ability to not just tell the same story over and over, but to have a plethora of stories from which they can select, like a buffet menu, to be able to say, oh, I see who's in front of me now. Now, I still need to make the same point because that's what I'm teaching today, but I can make that point through this story because I see in the audience, those are the kind of people, age, demographics, education, industry, those are the kind of people that I need to connect with today. Strong communicators understand that you can't tell the same story over and over and expect to get the same outcome when you've got a changing variable of audience. You've got to have stories that move with that audience. Now, I can also tell you that changing the story changes the mood. Changing the story changes the attitude of the listener. Changing the story changes their impression of who you are. If you only have one or two stories, one or two anecdotes, and they haven't been well rehearsed, chances are you've got a limited amount of impact, a limited amount of direction that you can lead them in. And so I want to challenge you as leaders to have more than one story, more than one audience that you've connected with, because you've got more than one crowd of people, type of people in the story. That makes a huge difference. I'm also going to tell you, though, that selecting that story is one end of that process. The other end of that process is not always looking back to find a story that makes a specific point. But the other end of the process is what I call story mining. Story mining is getting yourself into a trained routine of recognizing when a teachable moment comes up. And in that moment, making note. You know, that law of awareness says nobody has a green Buick until you buy a green Buick. The reticular activating system in the brain recognizes a new moment. But if you're not training yourself to intentionally capture that moment, then chances are that moment will pass you by. And when you try to recall it later, there'll be some little pieces missing. I encourage my clients, my students, to have some way of writing that down. I don't care if you take notes on your phone, if you take notes in a notebook, if you carry a journal around, if you have a story power journal, there's a place to write that stuff down and say, okay, who was the audience? What was the point? What were the emotions that I experienced? What were the emotions that the people in the audience experienced, or the other people in the story? Think of yourself standing on that intersection when the car accident happens. 5 eyewitnesses, 10 different stories. Why? Because even as the moment is evolving, new emotions, new revelations, new awarenesses, new things come to your mind. And just like that moment when you had that heated conversation with a loved one or a stranger, and you walked away and 10 minutes later the most brilliant answer in the world came to you. Well, it's inevitable. Our brains process things subconsciously significantly faster than we process consciously. So if I were to say something to you now, it's going to dawn on you 20 minutes later just how impactful that was, and maybe a clever reply will come with it. My challenge for you as communicators, as leader, is always to be aware of the moments that are going on around you, looking for, constantly aware that there's another teachable moment about to happen. I should take note. Even if it's just a mental note, I should take note. Who's in the room? Who's participating? How are they emotionally responding? How am I emotionally responding? How can I use this story later? What people in the audience are reacting to it in a positive way that as I recall the story, the same type of people will react in a positive way. This is the process of the story power method in phase 1 that I call story crafting and story selection. When you have the bookends of story selection, looking back through the things that you've already learned, and story mining, always on the lookout for new stories, new moments to teach, and you have a methodology to put them through to go, okay, now that I have the moment, I have the teachability, what is my call to action? How am I going to connect emotionally with these people? What things do I want to make sure that I say? And what things do I want to make sure that I don't say? How do I get my point across? Well, that's the whole point of the Story Power Masterclass. And I challenge you, if you haven't been a part of that, to check it out. You can go to storypowermasterclass.com. You can find lots of information, lots of demonstrations, lots of illustrations on the website. You'll also find there's a place to register. Now, our next class is Saturday, January 14th, but we'll be doing them every month through the year of 2023, and I challenge you to jump in on one of those. If you can't, hopefully by the end of January, we will have the online course released and you can participate in that, kind of a do-it-yourself, but it'll have all the tips and tricks and tools that you need to be able to participate by yourself in the whole process. Right now, there's 14 videos that are available, along with the downloads and the worksheets and the forms for you to be able to do that on your own. Very soon, it will be complete and you will have everything you need from story selection to leading the narrative. And I challenge you to participate in that. I want you to think, though, as you go through the day today, what new learning moment, what new teachable moment did I participate in or I witnessed that I could have used as an opportunity to lead others? And how will I craft that into a story that I can use in a minute to 2 minutes and make a profound impact on somebody's life? If you're having a challenge with that, reach out to me, storypowermasterclass.com. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.
Thank you.